Hello, I would like to welcome you on behalf of Management Productions. As many other event organizations, we expected that 2020 would be one of the most successful years. Unfortunately, COVID showed up. That's why we're here online, because bringing together people and knowledge is still the key to our future. Let's make this a great day.
Marco, if I may start with you. I have a burning question for you that I've been wanting to ask you a long, long time. You know, I'm an oil and gas person, and if I look at the North Sea, the future, the first energy garden of the future, say, we see a grid of pipelines all over the North Sea, connecting the UK with Norway, with the Netherlands. And if we have a new oil and gas development, even if it is a marginal one, it can become viable because the connection to the existing grid is actually easy and short because the grid is there. Now, wind came from another start, of course. The first wind farm, you built the wind farm, and then your company, TenneT, then puts up the cable between the wind farm and shore. And what I would like to ask you is that how long will we keep on doing that, connecting each and every wind farm to the shore, rather than building a grid where we can connect all the next wind farms? So the question actually is, what is your view on the development of the grid? What is of the electricity grid in the North Sea? What is your perspective there? How do you see that evolve from an A to B connection to a more versatile connection in the whole of the North Sea?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question, Jo. What we see is that when you looked at the Netherlands in the beginning, we had three wind areas, five different wind farms, if I may say so. And but they were dispersed over the North Sea, and it was also a question whether there was only going to be one, because at that time the industry had to utilize a huge cost reduction. And at that time, a part said, we can never do it, you know. So it was a question, will it be one wind farm, 2, 3, 4, or 5? And then it was also ending. And so we looked at it, and we, for example, when they were closer together, let's say the platforms or the grid connection systems are connected. But from a business case perspective, it didn't work out to really connect them in total. That was the first step. Then the second step was, let's say, and we also started with a kind of a standardization. It was a cost, the cost had to be down, and every wind farm was going to be tendered. It was a question whether it would really step up. Then we had the second, that is let's say the roadmap 2030, which was partly the same standardized concept. And including also, because it became further from shore, these were relatively short, close to shore, it became called what we call 2 gigawatt standards. And these are what we call hub ready. So we can connect them to the UK, for example, but we can also connect them between each other.
Okay.
So there already we see the first step. And after that, we see it emerging in what we call the North Sea Wind Power Hub, or that it's really like a network. But you need quantity to be able to do that.
Yeah, I understand.
And especially in the beginning, we focused more on drilling the cost down. So we looked at, because we had this, let's say, this portfolio, and we could already do some technological steps. For example, from 33 to 66 kV. And what we also are doing now, already with I think it's the 5th wind farm, where we connect oil and gas platforms.
Yeah.
So we already start. So it's more. The first was how can we build a radial connection as cheap as possible, or well, as cost efficient as possible.
Yeah.
And now we are going to the next step. So the future is for sure a connected system.
Yeah, and then probably connected maybe not just with electricity, but also the hydrogen connections between wind farms.
Yeah,
I'm very glad to hear that, because we have talked about this a couple of times, you and I. I was looking at how can you get to deeper and deeper integration. I did not know that, of course, you always want to do this cost efficiently as possible, and I knew that there was a huge target for the wind farms itself. The grid costs are nationalized. Yeah? Were they part of that target as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So at that time they were part of the target, and I think for the top of my head, there was a certain target, and we also made it. So we looked at 5 standardized connections, and of course we made it at once. You know, it was not a gradient step down, but it was at once realized.
Yeah. Excellent. Hessel. Shell has laid down big ambitions in the energy transition. Offshore is a big part of that. How does a company manage all these ambitions? You get a lot of criticism from you don't invest enough in renewable, and most of what you do is still in oil and gas, whereas other people say, yes, Shell is a front runner in showing where it needs to go, actually. But how do you manage all these different ambitions of making money with existing business and developing new business?
Yeah, that is, if I'm really honest, that's a question that's basically above my pay grade. And let me explain that. I think it's probably the most difficult question you can ask a company like Shell, which is all about speed. How fast does Shell have to go with its investments and its people and its skills and all those type of decisions? And our CEO says publicly, we do that in step with society. So also Shell really is behind the Paris targets and the CO2, the 2 degrees, everything as it has been decided there. We as Shell contribute to that for sure, in step with how governments and the consumers will behave as well. And it's, as I said, I can speak to what that then eventually means for budgets and growth of the offshore wind business. But how to do that as a total company, what we also do then in other parts of these new energy systems with battery investment and retail investments or hydrogen investments. But what we also still think is appropriate to do still with, say, gas investments, that is not to me to decide, that's to other people.
No, I understand that. By the way, I would encourage the audience to ask questions too. I don't know if we have already received some.
There's one.
Yes, please.
We've discovered new gas fields. It's for Hessel. We discovered new gas fields in the Dutch part of the North Sea. And the footprint of this gas is lower than importing gas from abroad. Is Shell still going to invest in getting this gas out?
I think we usually say we're not telling the audience necessarily where we are going to invest and when and how much. I think we are still an oil and gas company. So in general, we probably plan to still invest most of our capex and our budgets into that part. I think at the moment we are, in the last few years, in a sort of 10% of our annual numbers going to new energies. It is likely to increase, but that still means that a lot of the other budgets we have available is going to our more conventional activities. And what that particularly means for these gas fields in the Netherlands, I don't know.
Thanks.
If you could say that actually oil and gas business finds itself in a perfect storm at the moment. I've been in the business for 40 years, and you see that prices are consistently and continuously low for oil and gas. We see, talking about the Netherlands investment climate, that is not as good as it is in the countries around you. Hans Timmers talked about it, that is valid for wind, but it's for oil and gas as well. We have our Dutch nitrogen problems that we have added on to it ourselves. We have a CO2 tax, a national CO2 tax coming up that we will have to pay as well. And all of that, we have COVID around us. So it makes life very difficult. Do you think that this perfect storm could also help accelerate developments, Hessel, so that we move faster towards an emissionless energy system?
I'm sort of half glass, half full person, so normally my answer is yes. It is sort of inevitable that an energy transition will have its more difficult moments of going to the new, and a lot of people tend to not necessarily embrace the changes that are coming with it from the start. Other people are clearly first adopters and they want to go faster, but there's a whole other side of humanity that is not so easy to adapt. But then when having a crisis or difficult moments as we have at the moment, I think the textbook sometimes says never waste a good crisis. And maybe this is indeed an opportunity for, for governments, for voters with an election coming up, and also with our own personal choices. Indeed, all of us now working from home and not maybe traveling so much, which clearly has its benefits for footprint. And maybe every one of us can take a view on when things are allowed again, what will be my future behavior and what is the right choice to make.
Yeah. I think every crisis is an opportunity to learn, and that is in Chinese, I think it's even the same word for that. Talking about other developments in North Sea, Marco, how far are you with the North Sea Wind Power Hub, the consortium? Why is it a standalone hub, and why is it not connected with a North Sea energy program that is also running along?
Before I answer that one, Jo, may I? Because there was one thing I wanted to say anyway, and that was because of something Hessel said in the previous talk, and that was about safety. And that was something like, because I'm originating from the oil and gas, although it's a longer time ago as well, and I was learned, well, safety first. That was the thing, and you said it already, Hessel, that the wind industry still has something to learn from the oil and gas industry, where it's about safety. And one of the things which sometimes surprises me, because we as TenneT, we built, let's say, the offshore substations, and we built cable, but we have two systems. We have the oil and gas certification, offshore certification system. There's also shipping certification system, and we have the GWO, which is the wind association. Mm-hmm. And some companies who are working in all industries have to do 3. And it's not something for now, but for me it's a plea. How can we, if we really see these industries coming together, I would like to see it already starting with those kind of practical topics. You know, we talk about, and especially in the Netherlands, we like to talk about long-term visions, writing all kinds of reports, but these kind of things, I really would like that we find each other, not for now, but it's a plea to start doing that as well. Because we sometimes, depending on which company we work with, have different certificates to,
yes,
to use.
It's a good point. I agree. And I've seen it coming together, because if I look at, say 5 to 10 years ago, companies were really doing their own thing. And it was actually someone from TenneT who came to me, René Peters, we are not related, but he came and talked to me and said, "Jo, you are now going to clean up all the things that you have in the North Sea. You have to break it down." And I see TenneT laying cables, and I see windmills. What would happen if we would look at this garden, this energy garden, if we would make it our own, so that it would be one purpose? And the purpose would then be to build the best system, because it will be expensive anyway, the best system for the future. And I'm glad to see that people are coming together. When we started the initiative, North Sea Energy 1, I guess it is 5 years or so ago, we had a club of people and then some stepped out again. I also believe TenneT, probably for good reasons at the time. Also in the ministries, it was very difficult to get people out of their silos. Yeah, and I'm glad that both of you talk a little bit about a lot about collaboration. Yeah. Is it enough, is my question, because yeah, I see still a lot of siloing mentality, and of course, everyone has their own responsibilities in terms of cost reduction and what have you. I'm just hoping that the current crisis is a chance to make us work even better together. How do you view this?
Well, and I will also answer your earlier question as well. What you see is that when we should have started off really designing one system without knowing how hydrogen would emerge, how others would emerge, I don't think we would ever get there. Now, I think at one moment you have to start, but it has to be a kind of a no-regret base. Hey? You can build on. And I really believe in that. And I think in the beginning, it was also needed for us at least to focus on these first projects, because I started 2014. Now we have Borselen, at least the grid connection system, which is ready for both, for Blauwind and for Ørsted. And now it's also time to look further. And yes, now you see it more and more becoming an integrated question. Including the onshore grid. Let's not forget that part, because it's not only offshore. There has to be, and including demand. Yeah. It's not about generation, it's about demand as well. And on your question about how far is a North Sea wind power hub, we are currently really focusing on having now the first project emerge from that consortium. We are currently seeing, so we are collaborating with the Danish, the Germans, and the Netherlands, and we see a lot of possibilities there. Of course, we're also looking at the UK, but that's not from the North Sea Wind Power Hub at the moment. And currently, we have to get them from the, let's say, more study phase, which is needed, to the first project. You know, the time, I say the time for studying is about there, and now it's about the first projects. Yeah. But what you see is the three countries are struggling with, for example, electrons being produced in one country when they are transported to the others. So they're struggling with, because it's subsidized to a certain extent, especially in Germany, heavily subsidized. How do you work with that, you know? How are we going to work on it? And on the European level, it's not even, well, there are rules that you have to free up 70% of your connection to interconnection, not for, you know, the production. So there's also a lot of regulation which is hampering, but I think we will get there. You know, I'm sure we will get there.
Hessel, your view on this?
Yeah, I'm very much with Marco in a sort of sense that we needed the past to get where we are and to build from here. So we needed the sort of radial system, one project, one cable, one onshore substation in the very early days to grow to much larger projects and to at some point say, right, it's now pretty obvious that there will be an awful lot of large scale of this new technology called offshore wind. How do we now design for that? So I think it is appropriate that what we did in the past was the right trade-off to make at that time. But going in the future, I also like to believe that it's now accepted by most, maybe all, that let's say 50 years from now, there will be this massive 300 gigawatt type of energy generation out of the North Sea, serving multiple countries, and not just the coastlines, but even much deeper inland. And that system will look like something. And I think we are having a lot of stakeholders at the moment thinking that through. What could that look like and how do we get there? And I believe that everybody is realizing that the way to get there is probably not by continuing with power plant after power plant after power plant with its own connection to a system. Everybody accepts that there is a much more of a system design needed, both offshore and onshore, probably capturing multiple commodities, if you will, power, hydrogen, maybe even other types of gas. Storage will be an element of that. And to solve that is not necessarily going to be, let's have a full day with the right people in the room and they draw it on the whiteboard, we're done. It has a lot of consequences for legal arrangements, for business models, for regulatory setups by governments cross country. So it will take its time, but I have a lot of confidence in everybody now being aware that that is the thing we need to crack and work on in the coming years.
Yeah, and the question I would add on to that is, so how do you think that if you look at the government, the ministries, they too have to understand and to learn that coming out of the silo is the thing that is required to get to the best energy system. How do you view that? And of course, I don't want to be negative about it, but I encounter a lot of struggle there, that also ministries are organized in silos, like companies are, and it looks to me as though in companies you can make that step, that next step faster than in ministries. Maybe you view that differently, Marco?
Well, I see a lot of positive energy currently. And when I look at the countries, so when I look at the three countries, Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands, and I see a very rapid step up on this, exactly this topic.
Okay.
And possibly it's not that visible for all, but I see a lot of interest, especially also in the international. So there's a lot of, so it's the integration, it's an international part. And behind the let's say, how do you call it? Behind the curtains or behind the scenes, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And I think that will be soon visible. That's my belief.
It starts at the top, and that is where
Yeah.
you see it.
Yeah.
And now we have to drill that down as well. Would you agree with that, Hessel?
Yeah, and there's also an element of change is happening so fast at the moment. And maybe businesses and consumers are the first to find out. So consumers make their next choice. They buy a different car or they choose a different type of heating in their house. And that will make an impact on consumption patterns and therefore system requirements. Businesses see that behavior and invent new business models. And they come up with maybe new solutions. And let's take the offshore wind auctions. They set the next benchmark in a price. And in the last 3-4 years, I like to believe that basically every tender that was organized by a country set a new sort of, oh wow, now the industry is this level. Now, it is for me very acceptable that a government is equally surprised and is actually hearing the news slightly later compared to how consumers or businesses see the change coming in. So for governments to be a bit of a slower participant, I think is normal. It's not something you should accuse at the moment. It's just a reality that you can work with and you have to sort of take them on board as much as you can.
Yeah.
Which is happening. Let me also confirm that with
It sounds very good.
industry associations in each country, and then also at European level, there is a lot of interaction at the moment.
Yeah. And adding one thing is, if I look at it from a governmental perspective, if I should step in their shoes, what I also see is that facts and opinions are sometimes, all over the place. And sometimes people promise the world to them, and they also have to, because if they make the decision and it doesn't work out, so there's also something where, especially when there's certain new kids on the block, then people, of course, have to, and it's important that it's also fact-based, what we do.
Oh.
And that's, of course, also their responsibility. And sometimes that's quite difficult, because you have to look in the future, in development of technologies. That's not that easy.
And I understand that say, government organizations have to be very careful not to believe anything they hear. Basically, lobby organizations like mine, for instance, they will tell them, hey, we think it cannot work if you will build a system with only electrons. We believe you also will need molecules. And when I said that first time, they said, yeah, of course, you just want to be producing gas. I was happy that TenneT and Gasunie did a study, because they are not suspect and they have nothing to gain by producing gas, where they concluded actually, and I think it was said in one of the earlier sessions, that also by 2050, we will have a mix that is about half or something close to that. And so it is important that also here we find collaboration with more stakeholders, because if you're only a single one, you will always have the suspicion on you that you are arguing only your own case, and in some cases that is the case.
Yeah.
looking at Sylvia.
Yes.
Yeah, you must have more questions
Yes,
now, I
do.
believe.
Very interesting ones.
Okay.
With the variety of activities on the North Sea and all the new energy developments, do you foresee floating stations that will be developed for vessels to load up their batteries or energy on location, so say near wind farms, in order for them to stay out longer at sea and that way upgrade the workability of those ships?
Well, that's for me a little bit difficult to. I think this is really about the market. So I think where you have a distinction, I think we are a facilitating company. So we will not start those kind of activities. So when there's commercial interest, like we now do with connecting oil and gas platforms, then of course we can facilitate when there's possibilities. But I think that those kind of developments will be there. And I think there will also be floating solar. There will be way more offshore. And we as TenneT, we facilitate. And I also think that there will be, also, besides the molecules, the hydrogen, also when you look at the electricity system, the demand will double, about double, when you look at 2050. And that will also partly be because of that kind of activities. So the closer you are with source, the better it is.
Yeah.
True, yeah. You have a different view, or?
No, I think, I mean, as a vision statement, these things are all possible, and many other versions likewise. How exactly it will come and at what time and through which type of channel and commodity, I don't know yet. But the fact that there is this whole generation potential out there at sea, what can you do with it? And do we really have to bring it all to the shore first before it gets consumed, or can you already have some organization of that at sea? I can easily see the innovations coming.
Yeah. Wait.
Yeah, okay, go
There's
ahead.
one specific one for TenneT, and it's about, we all know the price of energy is low at the moment, so cost price reduction is very important in offshore wind. How is TenneT stimulating innovations and cost price reduction?
Well, when you look at the electricity transmission grid or the grid connection systems, we try to do it by first of all utilizing the grid more. So when you only utilize it when the wind blows, that is in our opinion, we want to combine it, for example, with an interconnector. So for example, if you combine it to the UK as well, then the moment you don't use it, the grid full, you can use it as an interconnector. That's one. And we also try to step up in, for example, technology. So we have a huge portfolio, including Germany. I'm also responsible for Germany. And so if you look at the total portfolio, we can push the market. You know, we can this chicken egg discussion. We can have a role there. So we also now on our 2 gigawatt standard, we can also go to a higher voltage level. And that means for the cable manufacturers that they know this whole column of project is going, and we also invest in that they do their first tests, etc. So, and they know it's coming, so they know there's market, and they will invest.
Yeah,
and I see that as our role.
Yeah, same question for Hessel. What innovative partnerships are you involved in for Shell to drill down the cost and to accelerate offshore wind by lower cost?
The list is very long. So it's global. We do it in Asia, we do it in the Americas, we do it in Europe, and it's in many areas. It is sometimes around system optimizations. It's sometimes about indeed just the offshore wind project or the O&M phase. But maybe the two that are worthwhile to highlight. One is that as part of our bid submission into the HKN tender last year, or earlier this year, I should say, sorry, we included a program of 5 particular innovation steps that we would execute on in the wind park, in the wind project, which is to do with indeed floating solar. There will be some hydrogen in there. We've done some things that have to do with smarter turbines, but all with the purpose of increasing the capacity factor / the usage of the grid. So that's been driving our innovation program there in HKN. And the other area where we have a partnership being developed is around a future that goes to much larger scale offshore wind to hydrogen. We do that in the north of the Netherlands. It's a consortium called North H2, which is a program for the next, say, 5 to 10 years, but with that long-term vision of gigawatt scale of offshore wind and hydrogen being combined as one project.
Yeah, sounds good. Any last questions from the audience?
Yes,
Sylvia?
and it's a funny one, or at least
that's
I
good.
think it is.
It's always a good last question if it is funny. Yeah.
If you could be Frans Timmermans for one day, what would you change in order to help your current activities within the energy transition?
And it cannot be your beard.
For both of you.
Yeah, so the first thing that popped to my mind is maybe drive harder for cross-country regulatory arrangements. So that, I think Mark already gave the example, what happens if a certain piece of seabed happens to sit in one country, but actually the closest distance to bringing it to shore is another country? And how do we accommodate those futures?
Marco?
Well, I had the same one because I already mentioned it, and it's really about that. It's really about this international cooperation, because now we see this silo is really there. And if we want to step up, we have to do it there. And you see it also now with Brexit, which is, in my opinion, a real pity there, because that is also hampering.
Yeah. So breaking the silos.
Yeah, break down the silos. I think that is a nice remark to end this interview with. I would like to thank you very much. Let me try and bring it to a close. I heard a lot about collaboration, makes me happy. At least the intention is there and the understanding that it is absolutely necessary. Yeah, I believe that people start to really speed up all the developments that will lead to that fantastic new needed energy system.